And you wanted to tell me about your first trip to England, the one that Pappy sent you on?
Yeah.
And didn't, was it one of your friends going?
Yes.
And
her daughter was over at Edinburgh.
And Pappy said, take my wife with you, and he surprised you that he had some money taken up? That's how it started?
Yeah, I didn't know.
Tell me about that.
I never thought I'd get to Wales or
So
England.
it was about, what, 1960-something?
I don't remember the time.
But probably the late 50s or the early 60s, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And anyway, we were out for a walk one Sunday afternoon. We used to walk around Bangor a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, when we got out to South 2nd Street, I said, oh, I have to tell Jane Lang something, because we were working both in the church.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, instead of calling her, maybe I'll just see if she's home. And she was home. Her husband wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
So we knocked at the door, and she said, oh, come on in. I'm so glad to see you, because my husband isn't here and my daughter isn't here. I said, well, your daughter goes to Chambersburg. That's in Pennsylvania. And she said, no, she's not there now. She said, she's in Edinburgh. She's
Scotland.
Huh?
In Scotland.
Mm-hmm. And she said, I'm going over to see her. I don't know, a couple of weeks. And Daddy said to her, well, take my wife with you. He said, I've been saying, I never asked to go. Never asked.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't, because I know we didn't have a lot of money. And he said, I've been saving money because I want her to go to see where her mother was born. So he sent me over, and I sat with her on the plane. Well, first I said, I don't think I want to go. I don't think I want to ever go on an airplane.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, oh, everybody else does, you'll be all right. So anyway, I went with her then, and went right to Edinburgh.
Scotland.
Mm-hmm. And her daughter, it was a time when they didn't have medicines.
Mm-hmm.
It was just so she was just in that. She and a couple of girls, one from China and one from, I don't know, a couple. They didn't go back home. They just waited. And, we went there, and then I had a room downstairs, and they had a room upstairs with. Jane went up with her
Mm-hmm.
daughter, and you had to put a quarter in to keep warm. Quarter in a thing by your bed. It was crazy. And then they had me up for tea upstairs with them, and we had a nice time. But I was there down on the very first floor alone,
Mm-hmm.
and I was pretty used to it. And we were there. Oh, we must have been there a week or more. And it was so cold, just so cold. It was the end of April, and it was terrible. But no, it was the beginning of April. And I said, Jane, I said, up my mind I was going to put boots in my suitcase,
Mm-hmm.
and I forgot all about it, because I thought it won't be like that over here. And then she said, well, I can't stand it either. My feet are so cold. So we walked down. Jane said, their little daughter Jane said, go over and see if that man down the street has anything left,
Mm-hmm.
because he usually sends them somewhere and then starts having summer things. and he had two things for us. One for me, which was pretty low, and Jane's was higher up out here. And, they were so warm. They were wonderful. Oh, they were good, and they weren't much. I forget how much, but so anyway, they took me around with them around Edinburgh, and we went up to see the castle and everything, and oh, it was beautiful, just beautiful to see. And then there was a queen. When the queen comes, there was a place down.
Her place in Scotland,
Uh-huh.
and she was there.
In Edinburgh. She was way down, and we went right through the place. You could, but then when I took Susan over, we couldn't. She was coming, and they were fixing the house all
Yeah,
up.
you went with Susan again in the
Yeah,
80s.
she went the third time with me, and then
Now, while you were on your first trip, though, didn't you go on your own to where your father was to look for relatives?
Yeah.
And you just asked at a pub?
Well, they when I wrote to what happened during the war, my father and his niece
Mm-hmm.
lived together with the family because he wanted to come to America, but he wasn't quite old enough. But then when
That was the First World War.
no, the Second World War.
Okay.
And
But
then,
your father was already in America. Well, your father was already in America by Second World War, right?
yeah, later on. But anyway, this aunt used to always send us gifts, and they were always books.
Okay. And she's in England, and your father was already over here by then, so she
Yeah.
would send gifts from England.
She was the
Okay.
only one. So pretty soon we got. I didn't know we had anybody over there except her. We didn't know anything about it. And the people across the street were from England, but they were from way down. And they said that there was something, they get a paper called the Salvation Army, something or other, and they saw that somebody wanted to know if they could find George Humphreys, and they came over running across the street.
And George Humphreys was your dad.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a paper from England looking for him.
Mm-hmm. Because when my stepmother came, when Aunt Jane was there, we wrote all the time,
Mm-hmm.
or she did, or Pop did. But when Bertha came, that my stepmother,
It's stopped for a while.
It stopped, period. And she, I don't know if she was jealous or what. She was just nuts. But anyway, we went out, Doc and I went out for this walk and met this lady, and she said she was going. He said, well, I've been saving money, and I want you to go and see where your mother was born. So that's how I happened to go over.
So during World War II, the neighbors put this ad in the paper looking for George Humphreys
Well,
because the Blitz was going on in London and they were worried about their sons, right?
Yeah, that's right.
But you couldn't take them. They couldn't come over to stay with you.
Well, Bertha wouldn't take one.
Okay.
And
There were two
Ernest-
boys, right?
Ernest, my brother,
This is probably about 1941.
he
We're
had
talking.
2 boys.
Okay.
And he had no money to take another one. He said he would love to, but he couldn't. It was just, he just had no money to take care of another child.
Mm-hmm.
And Bertha wouldn't take any, you know.
And there were 2 boys from England. They were looking for a place to stay
They were
in America because they were worried about the Blitz.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they said it was getting pretty bad because they were bombing quite a bit in their area.
Mm-hmm.
And Pop said, well, you just have to write to them and tell them we can't take them. Bertha won't take one. And I was working. I said to Bertha, if you would take care of him today, through the day, till I get home from work, I would take care of him at night, take him for a walk or do something. So she said, I'm not going to. So Ernest couldn't take all three of them, so.
Oh, there were 3 boys from England. Okay. Did they ever come over here, or they stayed in England?
No, they've been, 2 of them have been over.
But not to visit later, and they didn't come over during the war?
No.
Okay.
No. So then she wrote, and Harriet wrote and said that it's getting better. They're not being bombed in their area quite so much. And they made a hole in the backyard, like, to have that they could go down in there.
Bunker, trench.
And that's how it started, because I didn't even know we had anybody over there.
So you originally went over to Edinburgh, but then those relatives who you wrote back and forth with, you sought them out when you were in England, right?
No, I went with them because that was somebody to go with.
Okay.
Bob said, and then you can leave them and go down to Liverpool.
But when you went to Liverpool, you went by yourself, right? But then you found
my pop's niece.
You found relatives there.
His niece, his sister's daughter, and that was Harriet, Aunt Harriet.
You arrived there, and you didn't.
I didn't.
You didn't know them, and the women didn't go in the pubs at the time. But didn't you?
No.
You went anyway, and you went to a pub to look for relatives, and there was a man there, right?
Yeah, but I left. I went to the door and I said that I was. Oh, I know. I called from Edinburgh to May. Her name was May.
Okay.
And I said, I'll be coming down that way. And I said, Pop tells me that you were his niece. And she said, oh, she was so glad to know about somebody over here. So I left them in Edinburgh, and they went all through the Edinburgh and way up into the Scotland area. But I went down with the train down to Liverpool, and I stayed with her and her husband, and they did a lot of traveling, and they showed me the most beautiful pictures that they took on all their travels. Oh, Norway and everywhere. They just loved to travel. And I was in their house 3 days. And he took me downtown where he worked, and they showed me the big theaters, or the big churches. One was a Catholic church, it was beautiful, and one was a regular church.
Anglican.
Oh, really pretty and beautiful. And it was just like where those singers were, that area of the city. So they said, and every day she would go across the street a little bit and get food. It was funny. They wouldn't buy a whole bunch of food, and they only had a small little refrigerator, and they had money, but they just didn't. And he said, well, we're going to go take Edith downtown now, and we're going to put her on the boat across the river, and then she can go to Wales, which is what she wants to do. So she said, oh, I won't have anything for you to eat tomorrow.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't, you had people you knew relatives in Liverpool. It was when you went to Wales that you were on your own. Okay.
Yeah, it was on there.
And that's where the story about the pub comes in, right?
Yeah. And then
so where did the boat take you in to Wales?
The boat took me into almost Liverpool. Liverpool.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Or did you left from Liverpool, or the boat arrived in Liverpool?
No, I got from New York. I went to Liverpool.
From New York, you went to Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
Then you took the train to Liverpool, and then
Yeah.
from Liverpool you took the boat to Wales.
Yeah.
And when you went to Wales,
No, I didn't take the boat. I took these people that were Pop's nieces.
Oh, okay.
And they